So Trump and Secretary of Defense, because I'm not calling him Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth gathered about 800 U.S. generals and admirals at Marine Corps Base Quantico in Virginia for what was billed as a strategy session, but it quickly turned into a 2-hour rambling display of false claims, demands for personal allegiance, and whining about how the armed forces has gotten soft. Now, the two speeches that were given to the 800 or so generals cost the American taxpayer around $6 million dollars in travel and security for leaders pulled from posts around the world, and all of this against a backdrop of a government shutdown that could delay pay for active duty troops. But that didn't come up in Trump's speech with the generals. Now, Hegseth spoke first and for about an hour, where he laid out 10 directives aimed at ending what he called divisive policies on diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as DEI, while mandating twice yearly fitness tests for everyone from privates to four-star generals and restoring male-only standards for combat roles. And I swear to God, this could have been an email, Pete Hegseth. You didn't need to have a speech for this. He also framed the changes as a return to a pure warrior focus amid what he saw as years of softness that weakened readiness. He declared, quote, "From this moment forward, the only mission of the newly restored Department of War is this, war fighting," end quote. Well, that and picking up trash in DC or standing around ICE facilities. Or who knows, deploying to war zones in Portland. Hegseth then said, quote, "We became the woke department, but not anymore. No more identity months, no more DEI offices, dudes in dresses, no more climate change nonsense," end quote. He then slammed fat generals who had let standards slip into decay under prior orders, urging them to ensure peace while preparing for war, all while being unrelenting and uncompromising in that pursuit. End quote. He even called for military leaders who disagreed with these policies to, quote unquote, "do the honorable thing and resign" if they did not get behind his anti woke push. He even stopped to lambaste some respected former peers of the generals in that room, including General Milley. And this comes after he made a smartass comment online about General Hodges, who is my former U.S. Army Europe commander. After Hegseth was done, Trump took the floor and he followed with an hour-long talk containing the same old boasts he makes about his past investments in the military, promises of over $1 trillion spending bill for the National Defense Authorization Act in 2026, and then he launched into some sharp warnings for everyone in the room. He said he would fire any leader on the spot if they did not align with his views, and even told reporters en route to Quantico that, quote, "I'm going to be meeting with generals and with admirals and with leaders, and if I don't like somebody, I'm going to fire them right on the spot." End quote. When inside the building and giving his speech, he added that anyone unhappy with his words could leave the room and say goodbye to their rank and future, all while Pete Hegseth chimed in by saying, "as well as their career," all of which is kind of a heavy line that hung in the air, as there are already rumors of loyalty checks becoming the norm within this administration. Trump then escalated further, warning of the enemy within and saying this is going to be a big thing for the people in this room because it's the enemy from within and we have to handle it before it gets out of control. It won't get out of control once you're involved at all, though. End quote. And what he's alluding to here is this definitive pivot from foreign operations to domestic operations for the US military, where federal troops are deployed as war fighters to American cities and used against the American people. As I said, he's already called Portland a war zone, which is patently ridiculous. I mean, I have family in Portland and I go there often. Hell, I'm going there soon, and it is not a war zone. But then again, Trump has never actually been to war, so maybe he's just confused. Trump also boasted to the generals in the room of his removals of other flag officers like Joint Chiefs Chair General C.Q. Brown and Navy Chief Admiral Leah Franchetti, as well as several lawyers in the Army and Air Force, tying them to supposed failures around diversity efforts and vague displays of disloyalty. But since taking office in January, Hegseth has also dismissed dozens of high-ranking generals and admirals over similar concerns, alongside a 20% cut in four-star positions across the board, which honestly I'm not entirely opposed to. I think we actually have become top-heavy in the military, but nonetheless, outside of the cuts, just merely firing generals and replacing them with yes men is going to cause problems because we are likely replacing skilled warfighters and planners who moved up the ranks based on merit with those who just kissed Trump's ass at this point. What's even weirder is when Trump entered the room, the generals around the room stood at attention, which is protocol, and it unnerved Trump because they didn't clap. Their faces were neutral in expression because they are supposed to remain apolitical as according to standards and discipline. Trump actually addressed this because he's normally used to crowds at his rallies clapping and cheering for him, saying that he'd never walked into a silent room before. I mean, he clearly did not know that they were standing at the position of attention as standards and disciplines of protocol require, which Hegseth, if he was worth a shit. Now, this unnerved Trump so much that he later paused again, urging applause because this thing was being broadcast live and it started to look like the generals were uneasy. Trump was becoming more and more thrown off by a palpable lack of energy, which drew online ridicule from many people, including retired leaders such as General Paul Eaton, who called the whole thing a partisan lecture unfit for professionals sworn to duty over drama. Now, during the speech, Trump did say he backs the generals 100%, but I can guarantee you, in the minds of those general officers, the collective narrator was saying Trump most certainly does not. And that's because Trump then launched into a shocking plan to use American cities as training grounds for the military. And when you saw the video feed, the generals started looking around at each other with uneasy glances. To be clear, the proposal to use American cities as training grounds for the United States military really risks serious consequences here. First and foremost, there's civilian safety concerns. Second, there are legal boundaries. And then there are military readiness concerns for when a real war zone happens. The plan, which, as I said, prompted visible unease among generals in the room, could lead to accidents or disruptions in populated urban areas and erode the public trust of an institution that traditionally ranks very high for most trusted. And that was a hard earned reputation that was destroyed after Vietnam. I mean, God forbid neighborhoods become battlegrounds. The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 restricts federal troops from domestic roles without congressional approval, so this move will definitely spark legal challenges and is fueling real fears of militarized overreach, especially when paired with Trump's talks of this enemy within, which eerily mimics rhetoric of several previous dictators over the last century just before they used secret, militarized police forces to seize power. This reeked of the opening gambit that strongmen like Putin use when bringing all of their leaders into a room to get them on board with future nefarious plans. Nonetheless, despite the billing as a strategy meeting, there was no working groups or distributed planning efforts, no strategy whatsoever. It was really just a rally to bring all the generals together for two speeches and then send them on their way, which is a complete waste of taxpayer funds and the very valuable time of these military leaders. But that's not all. Trump, in his speech, wove several repeatedly disproven claims. He said former President Biden never boasts about having the strongest military in history, despite the fact that Biden actually has immediate family members who were in the military, unlike Trump. And Biden actually called them the strongest military the world has ever seen back in 2023, as well as other times. Trump lied directly to the Space Force generals' faces by saying Biden tried to shut them down before giving up. Yet White House spokesperson Jen Psaki confirmed the full backing of the Biden administration back in 2021, and in fact, they increased the Space Force's budget. All things these generals know. Additionally, the generals know what the numbers are when it comes to aid to Ukraine, which is around $135 billion, but Trump lied directly to them, saying it was $350 billion under Biden. These generals know the actual numbers. They're the ones executing this mission. And of course, he touted that he ended 7 wars, naming places like Congo and Rwanda, despite the fact that fighting continues in both of these, and AFRICOM knows that. Trump went on to talk about how countries like Congo and Venezuela have emptied their prisons to send criminals as migrants to the United States, and Biden allowed it, but that lacks any proof whatsoever. Trump talked about how migration hit a peak of 25 million encounters under Biden, when the real number was actually 11 million. And then, of course, he talked about the 2020 election being fraudulent and tied to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, despite the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022 and there is zero evidence of the 2020 election being rigged. Now, the public perception on this is quite sour, with all but the most MAGA brainwashed on social media already mocking the administration's approach. The general's visible skepticism in the videos hints there's internal resistance, and we're already somewhat seeing it, especially when these Trump loyalty driven firings are coming up. In general, this is likely going to fracture military cohesion and leave the nation less secure. Our potential foes abroad see this as chaos. This pivot to the enemy within is going to signal to Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and other potential foes to test American resolve around the world. Now, the meeting ended without any generals actually being dismissed, but we'll see where that goes. And the guidance was clear here. Do not question the direction of the president, or your career is over. Officers traditionally were empowered to ask those types of questions, which is why officers take a different oath than enlisted people. And our oath is sworn to protect and defend the Constitution, not obey the orders of the president. It seems that Trump is now seeking to promote generals not on merit, but on personal favor. And I don't think I have ever seen such a blatant authoritarian Putin-esque display by a US president and his defense secretary ever. Right now, we are dealing with real geopolitical problems all around the globe, and this push for conformity over expertise leaves the force that protects this country strained and fractured, all while trust in the military by civilian oversight is taking a hit. And frankly, all of these policies are going to echo for years after Trump leaves office.